Arthur Miller gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel of his black Cadillac Escalade so tightly his knuckles turned white. Outside, the Chicago suburbs blurred past, bathed in the cold, sharp light of October. Crimson and gold maple leaves danced in the turbulent wake of the car, but Arthur didn't notice the beauty of the season. His focus was entirely on the woman in the passenger seat. Melanie, his wife of 15 years, was leaning against the window, her head lolling slightly. She was still drifting in the hazy, drug-induced aftermath of a complex dental surgery. The cabin smelled of expensive cologne and premium leather. As a leading thoracic surgeon, Arthur lived for sterility and order. His life was much like his operating room, everything in its place, every movement calculated. He glanced at Melanie. Her face, usually flawless and perfectly composed, now looked pale and alien in the fading afternoon light. "How are you holding up, honey?" Arthur asked softly, his voice steady. Melanie didn't respond with a smile. Instead, she let out a low, raspy chuckle that made the hair on Arthur's neck stand up. Her eyes fluttered open, but there was no warmth in them. It was the look of someone who had finally dropped a heavy mask. "You're such a bore, Arthur," she croaked. Her voice, usually melodic, now cut through the silence like a scalpel through bone. "Always so perfect. Always so clinical. If you only knew how much I hated our perfect Sunday brunches on the terrace overlooking the lake. I was suffocating." Arthur felt a chill settle in his chest. "It's just the anesthesia talking, Mel. You need to rest." "The drugs don't lie, Artie," she giggled, a sound that made his heart skip a beat for all the wrong reasons. "But Chris lies beautifully. He promised me we'd take your bonuses and run. And the kids, Toby and Emily, you didn't even notice they have his eyes, did you? Dark, almost black. You're just a useful ATM with a medical degree." The world outside the Cadillac seemed to vanish. Arthur stared at the road ahead, but all he saw were the ruins of his life. Melanie drifted back into a deep sleep, leaving him alone with a truth that could never be unheard. The following days, Arthur operated in a state of icy calm. He knew that when an organ is riddled with gangrene, you don't treat it, you amputate. He hired Marcus, a private investigator who specialized in high-net-worth betrayals. They met in Arthur's study, a room filled with heavy oak furniture and walls lined with ancient medical journals. The desk lamp cast long, dramatic shadows across the floor. "I need everything," Arthur said, his eyes fixed on the shadows. "Bank records, encrypted messages, DNA tests, and most importantly, I want the full history on Chris Vaughn." Chris was their close family friend, a real estate developer who had overseen the renovations on their lakefront estate. While Melanie played the role of the recovering wife at home, Arthur was prepping the surgical table for her ultimate downfall. Friends, if you're enjoying this story of justice and want to see more like it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to see such stories more often. It really helps us grow. The investigator's report confirmed Arthur's darkest fears. Melanie and Chris had been together for nearly a decade. She had been funneling millions from their family trusts into Chris's failing development projects for years. But the final blow was the DNA results. Toby and Emily were not biologically his. Arthur sat in his study, staring at a framed family photo. He didn't cry. He simply closed the folder and moved to the final stage of his plan. Arthur knew Chris's weakness: greed. The man was drowning in debt and looking for a miracle. Using his elite connections, Arthur introduced Chris to a wealthy investor from New York, actually a professional actor Arthur had hired. The deal involved a massive multi-million-dollar medical plaza. Arthur invited Chris and Melanie to a luxury restaurant with a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. The city lights flickered in their whiskey glasses like cold diamonds. "Chris, you're the best developer I know," Arthur said, looking directly into the eyes of the man who had laughed behind his back for years. "I've vouched for you with the New York firm. This is the one." Melanie was glowing. She saw this as their golden ticket. She pressured Arthur to put up their estate and his private practice as collateral to secure the funding. Arthur hesitated for 2 weeks, allowing her to manipulate him. In reality, every document Chris signed was a legal trap. All the liability and debt were shifted entirely onto Chris and Melanie's hidden accounts. The climax arrived on Arthur's 50th birthday. Guests gathered at their lakefront mansion. The grand living room was filled with flowers and the scent of expensive catering, but the air felt electric with unspoken tension. "I have a surprise for everyone," Arthur announced, standing with a glass of champagne. He pressed a button on a remote. Instead of a birthday tribute, the massive 4K screen displayed bank transfers, surveillance footage from hotels, and the audio recording from the car where Melanie confessed. Silence fell over the room, so heavy it felt like it could be cut with a scalpel. Chris stood up, his face turning the color of ash. "Congratulations, Chris," Arthur said, his voice flat and cold. "You're now a father of 2 with $40 million in debt. And Melanie, you can pack your bags. I've already filed for divorce and contested paternity. The bank is seizing this house tomorrow because of that deal you wanted so badly." The following months were a nightmare for the traders. Their reputations were incinerated. Chris lost his business and faced federal charges, while Melanie ended up in a cramped apartment on the edge of the city, struggling to support children who no longer had access to the Miller fortune. Arthur met the kids one last time in a quiet park. Golden leaves carpeted the ground, and the air smelled of wood smoke. "I will always fund your education through a trust," he said, looking at Toby, seeing only a stranger's reflection. "But I can't be the man in that house anymore. I'm sorry." Early the next morning, Arthur loaded his suitcases into his car. The estate was sold. He stood in the empty foyer, watching the sunlight hit the bare hardwood floors. On the kitchen island, he left a small block of oak he had carved himself. On it was burned a single word: free. Arthur started the engine and drove away into the morning mist, not once looking back. For the first time in 15 years, he could finally breathe. What would you have done in Arthur's shoes? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts.